Parents, how did your son or daughter's significant other win you over? Story 1. I'm a martial arts instructor. Among other things, I caught my daughter's boyfriend looking at my belt rack, 5th degree black belt, and trophies from when I was much younger, and he said, "Are all those yours?" "Yep." "So you know how to throw someone?" "Yep." "Could you teach me?" How much of a setup did I need? I took him into the backyard and threw his skinny ass around for about 45 minutes. And every time he hit the ground, he got back up with a huge smile and said, "That was awesome. Show me how." So I took him to my class with my daughter and had her practice throws on him. He never complained, never flinched, and never bit. After class, I told my daughter I liked him. Sadly, a few days after, she broke up with him because she liked someone else. Story 2. Not a parent, but a sister who is fiercely protective of her brothers. My eldest brother was terrified of me, but I'm quite aloof, so I get it. The defining moment of my coming to love her was when we visited the zoo. On the way in, she saw a little girl getting a butterfly face painted on her. She, aged 28, wanted the same thing. My brother said, "No, no way, don't be ridiculous," etc. She said nothing more about it and just went about her day. An hour or two later, she went to the bathroom. She took a while and returned with a butterfly on her face and the biggest smile I have ever seen. Her managing to cause this moment of total despair but also love on my brother's face was the moment. Edit. Just in case you're wondering, my brother is not a control freak. It was a cutesy, flirtatious kind of behavior on both their parts. No need to raise alarm bells. Story 3. My wife won my parents over easily. Preface. Had an old Rottweiler named Max that was young at heart, but clearly showing his age. My previous girlfriends never petted him or gave him attention. He didn't crave it, but he wanted to be acknowledged. Fast forward a few years, and I bring my girlfriend, now wife, home for Christmas break. I introduced her to Max, and she immediately sat on the floor and rubbed him, petted him, and just gave him the love that no other girlfriend gave him. I hadn't seen his little nub wag so quickly in a long time. He ended up falling asleep with his head in her lap. Max is no longer with us, but at least I got his approval before he passed. I will never forget that day. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. By the way, my wife loved on my old Rottweiler, and my parents approved. Story 4. I know the exact moment I won my wife's family over, as I could see it in her father's eyes. It was in high school, before we started dating. The first time I went over to her house, actually. Her father and 2 brothers are all pretty tall, and I'm average height. It's a very alpha male household, and they had this thing they like to do to potential boyfriends. So when my wife left the room to go to the bathroom or whatever, all 3 of them stood, lined up shoulder to shoulder, and loomed over me with no words, just staring and looming. I found out later that her last boyfriend almost cried when they did this to him. I've always been really socially awkward, but an odd part of that awkwardness is that I'm never intimidated by people. I don't know why, but they just don't frighten me. I slowly stood up, looked them all in the eye, and then poked her dad right in the tummy. I said, "Boop." He stared for a second, and then a giant grin split his face. It turns out that he's a massive goofball. From that moment on, I was a member of the family. The whole dating and marriage thing was just a formality to them. I love how something as small as a boop could win over a whole family. It's always nice to see that even in a household full of alpha males, they still appreciate a good sense of humor. It's great that the dad didn't take offense and instead saw the funny side of things. Story 5. My daughter's significant other, gonna call him John, gained my full approval just recently. A little backstory. Me and my wife had an accidental baby just last year. We are in our late 40s. And my family was rather shocked considering we already have a 28-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter at that point. This may sound strange so far, but it will make sense later. My daughter met John in college and started dating after being friends for a year or so. Didn't take long after that before we met him, and we thought he was a decent kid, if not a little bit socially awkward and sort of uncomfortable around us. All her previous boyfriends were more outgoing, and this kid was quiet. Didn't really think he was going to last. My daughter eventually got an internship out of the country, and now they're in a long-term relationship. and I was skeptical whether or not this kid was going to stick around. Strangely enough, he visits the house and hangs out with my older son, and we all talk and have dinner together pretty frequently, which is interesting considering my daughter never expected him to do this. I found out that the main reason that he visited us so often was because my daughter was worried that her new little brother would forget who she is while she is gone. So when John would play with our son, when he thought nobody was around, he would show him pictures of my daughter, making goofy faces to try and make sure that he will remember his big sister. When I brought this up with my daughter, she didn't know that John was doing this. That was probably the moment when I started wholeheartedly approving of him. Story 6. Won my SO's dad over by shaving him. We had a not too close relationship, always quite distant. After he suffered a stroke and was hospitalized, he couldn't move too well, and as he did not want to be washed and shaved by the nurses, and my SO was not able to do this, it was my duty. Even though we couldn't really talk, I knew I got his approval. He said to take care of her, but unfortunately passed away a few days later. Edit. Yes, I'm still together with the girl, a real family with 2 kids now. Story 7. My good friend got dumped by his girlfriend halfway through college after she cheated on him. Her dad called and said how his daughter is a moron with the following. You know, there is always so-and-so, her 1-year younger sister. Oh, what a story. When a dad's that ready to hand you any of his daughters, you win, man. You win. Story 8. I was supposed to be one of those good Asian daughters that didn't date until I finished college. I got rebellious in sophomore year and decided to keep dating the guy who took me to winter formal. Mom actually liked him, but Dad refused to acknowledge him. One day my dad mentioned he got a new car stereo and was going to take it to Best Buy to have it installed. But the boyfriend wanted to handle it and spent an entire Saturday afternoon installing the radio and cleaning up the wires in his dash. Dad loved him afterward and basically treated him like his own son. My parents didn't even bat an eye afterward when we started living in sin a couple of years later. But by that time he was an engineer, we were engaged, and I couldn't give a rat's ass. Story 9. Not quite what was asked, but I knew I was there with my SO's folks when her dad stopped giving me room temperature beers from the pantry and started giving me cold beers from the fridge. Story 10. I won my boyfriend's, now husband's, parents over by throwing a party. It was his birthday, and I had gotten a good number of people to show up for a surprise party. He was on the phone with his parents when he walked in and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" He got all teary-eyed and told his parents, "I have to go. It's a surprise party. I didn't know I had so many friends." For good measure, I sent them photos of the party as well. His mom particularly liked the set of photos that showed my SO and friends battling a bomb-shaped grill that caught on fire and exploded. Story 11. My parents are pretty traditional and really like the idea of any potential boyfriends asking my dad's permission to date me. However, after 3 years of undergrad living away from home and inevitable casual boyfriends, they had kind of come to accept that this was not going to happen. I made this joke after a one-night stand made it clear that he wanted to date me. We went on a few dates and things were progressing well. However, I was surprised one day to hear that my father and brother were coming to visit the city for a day. Turns out this guy had contacted my brother on Facebook and was taking him and my father out to lunch to ask permission to date me. This one-night stand is now my husband. Man, he must have been like, "I had you-know-what with your daughter last night, and I was wondering, would it be okay if I took her to a movie or something like that?" Story 12. Our daughter came home from college with a boy she had been dating for a few weeks. They weren't serious, but he lived too far away to go home for Thanksgiving. That weekend, her old high school flame dropped by, and we didn't like him much since he had been very abusive when our daughter was dating him. When he showed up, he tried to convince our daughter to go someplace with him to talk things over. She didn't want to, and so he started getting loud and obnoxious. The new boyfriend was trying to give her some space and not be the possessive caveman type, but when he heard the old boyfriend call our daughter the C word, he came out on the porch and threw a wicked punch at the guy. Unfortunately, he missed, and he got the worst of the ensuing scuffle before I could break it up. But he got a few good licks in, and I'm pretty sure some of them would leave nice bruises. Not that I condone brawling, mind you. The old boyfriend skulked off, and we brought the new boyfriend in and got him cleaned up. He was only 19, but he got an ice-cold beer with dinner. They dated for a couple of years, but eventually broke up. She's had a few boyfriends since, but he's the only one I ever addressed as a son. Yeah, the fact that he was willing to put himself on the line for someone he had been dating only for a few weeks shows just how much he cared about her. It's too bad that their relationship didn't work out in the long run, but the fact that the father still regards him as a son just goes to show how much of an impact he had on their family. Story 13. Not a parent, but I'll talk about how my white as Wonder Bread SO found some common ground with my Middle Eastern parents. Eating meals together is a really important part of my culture. My current SO was willing to try anything and everything my mom put in front of him. My SO came from a household where his mother only ever cooked meat and potato type of meals, and they never ate out at restaurants, so he had a beginner's palate. Still, he tried everything from pickled vegetables to rice with weird stuff in it, and even stews that look like liquid poop. My mom is a sucker for anyone who will eat her food, so she started to like him a bit more after having him over for dinner. Story 14. My grandmother has never liked any of my boyfriends. She always told me flat out that she didn't really like them, which hurt me immensely, but wasn't really out of character. Pretty much nothing I pursued or achieved was good enough for her. I resigned myself to the fact that she would never like anyone I brought home. She never really warmed up to my mother, even though my mom is an amazing human being. No one was good enough for my dad in her mind. Then one day she surprised me. After meeting my significant other for the first time, she told me, "Well, I didn't expect to like him, but I did. He looks at you when you speak, listens to what you say, and responds in a way that shows genuine interest." That was it. That's all a guy had to do in order to impress my grandmother. I'm slightly horrified that she didn't see those qualities in any of the other men I brought home. That happened 6 years ago, and my significant other and I are married now, expecting our first child. Story 15. According to my girlfriend, I won over her mother when I helped her grandfather get up and down after surgery and offered to stop by and help him out for a few weeks. I just thought I was being polite. Story 16. My now husband David and I met online and were in an LDR while I was in college near Duluth, Minnesota. We had never met in person before, and I invited him to come to see me. I told my mom about the meeting, and she was really paranoid about the "call me every day so I know you're alive" type of thing. He came, and we really hit it off, and we're having a lot of fun. After the second day, Mom was convinced that he at least wasn't an axe murderer. And after a couple of more days, I decided that I was into him enough that he should meet my parents. I know, poor guy, but this was a good thing in the long run. So I invited them up on that Saturday. They picked us up and we all went out to lunch and made some polite conversation. We decided we should take a small trip to Split Rock Lighthouse, a famous lighthouse on Lake Superior about an hour from Duluth. I remembered that I left my camera in my dorm, so we swung by so I could pick it up. I left David in the car with my folks, alone for just a few minutes. While I was gone, my dad joked, "Quick, let's drive off." To which David, who has a very sarcastic, dry wit, responded, "I knew that one way or another this trip would end with me lifeless in the woods." There was a shocked pause, and then my parents started cracking up. When I returned, it was clear the ice had broken, and they relayed what had been said to me. My mom was like, "I think he'll fit right in." She often relayed this story, characterizing it as the moment she decided that David was right for me. Luckily, I agree. Story 17. My mom didn't like my significant other at all at first. I went to college, broke up with the boyfriend I had back home that she loved, and moved in with a guy she didn't approve of because of his religion, and she thought he was dark and evil. He's pagan and probably the nicest guy I know. Then one day he and I drove to their house to tell them the news that they didn't want to hear. I was pregnant. Mom cried and told me I ruined my life. And my normally quiet boyfriend got angry and stood up to her saying, "Why would you say that to her? She never wanted to be in college anyway. It's better that she drop out early than spend the rest of her life in debt doing something you forced her to do. Her life isn't over just because she isn't staying in college." No one had ever stood up to my mom before, And from that moment on, she had a ton of respect for him. Now, she absolutely loves him. I was expecting World War III. Edit. You don't have to go to college to be considered doing something with your life. Just because someone is pagan doesn't mean they're evil. And the expecting World War III jokes were funny the first time. Then you all beat it like a dead horse. Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.